Welcome to the MuseCast, where we squeeze every last drop of inspiration out of Sunday's sermon.
Oh, professional.
Yeah, it was very professional. Yeah. Although I've been thinking about, like, when I do this, if I could go, hey, Except the problem is that I push myself away from the microphone, so it
would be like an echo effect, like a.
I think it would. Yeah. Yeah.
That could be cool. We should try it.
Well, here's what I found in my life. Whenever I try to be cool, it has the opposite effect. So I probably should just stick with what I know.
Just trust yourself to naturally fall into it when it happens.
Right. Right. I'm just naturally cool. Yeah. That's what I keep telling myself. Yes.
Well, I want to say Happy Muse Day to Danta. Welcome to one and all.
Oh, wait a minute. Hold on.
Oh, I'm very excited. I think I have an idea, but with Dan, you never know. Oh, yes, here we go. We are ready.
The lights don't work on it anymore, so I thought I threw it away. And then I realized I didn't. And
nope, you got it. Perfect.
Right.
Now we are in the season. We are ready to go. We are in our Christmas series, Fulfilled. We had week 2 of that. And Dan, so we're going to get to all the things because this is one of those beautiful shows where I just sit back and let Dan do all the work because he prepped a sermon, delivered a sermon, will deliver his summary, talk more about his sermon, and I'll just get the benefit of like soaking it all in. It's gonna be really good. But one of the things I thought would be great is just to remind people kind of the thrust behind Fulfilled, because like we've said before, Christmas time, Christmas series, sometimes you're just like, what more can you say? And here we go. Yeah. We've got a different angle that we're coming at it with. So I would love to just kind of remind folks about that. I want to say Happy Muse Day. I want to say Danta is doing well, did well, got a haircut last week, I think.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Good job. And so that's kind of the lay of the land on this glorious, cold December day.
Yeah. Yes. So Fulfilled is the name of the series, and it is a cold December day, and it's unusually cold, and it's going to get worse, and I'm not happy about that. So let's not even think about that. Let's pretend this is a hula hoop. Okay. No, is that what they're called? The hula hoop?
A lay?
A lay. That's what it is.
You mean a lay?
Yeah.
It's hula hoop is this.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. I am so uncool. Anyway, the point is, this is what I know. What I know is that we are in a Christmas series called Fulfilled. And really, and like you said, I mean, every year we do a Christmas series, and it's the most important event in the history of history. And so, of course, we want to celebrate it and talk about it every year. But, you also, because it's so important, you want to keep it fresh. So we're always trying to find new angles to kind of get at the profundity of this historical kind of good news that took place. And this year, what we decided is we'd like to focus on this idea of fulfilled, and then kind of use that in a few different ways. The first way, that just the basic fulfilled, is in the scripture, there were these anticipations of a Messiah. There were these anticipations of a new David, of a new Moses, of a new Israel, and all of that. And so we want to show how those Old Testament anticipations are just technically fulfilled in the Christmas story. And so that's just a very textual sense of the word fulfilled. And then we're also looking at how the good news of the Christmas story ends up ultimately fulfilling the hopes of the world. And then finally, we're looking at how the good news of the Christmas story fulfills us in ways that nothing else can. And so that is the kind of my pitch for the series. And so far, it's been really fun. I've enjoyed it. So should I just transfer right into my summary then?
Yeah, let's see if I can remember your sermon title, The Delight of the Lord.
Nice. Good job.
Oh,
Good
very
job.
nice, very
Yeah.
nice. And so yeah, this was the second sermon out of the series. And yeah, take it away, Dan.
All right. Sounds good. Greg looked at two verses in his. I only really focused on one. I had a second that I took out that I do want to talk about, maybe after the summary sometime. But I really looked at, we find the summary or the summary. We find the prophecy fulfilled in. It would be nice if there were summaries that we could find in the gospel. That would make my job a lot easier. But no, this is in Matthew 2:13-15. Matthew is talking about this verse that is fulfilled in this story. And he says, this is the verse that he refers to. This fulfilled what the Lord had said through the prophet, out of Egypt I called my son. So that's the supposed prophecy that was supposedly fulfilled. Out of Egypt I called my son. And Matthew had just talked about how Joseph and Mary and Jesus had fled into Egypt to escape Herod. And then now when Jesus starts his ministry, he does so by coming out of Egypt. And so that's the fulfillment of this verse. Well, but what's interesting is when you look back at Hosea, where this prophecy originally was, you find out that Hosea, when he says this, he was not thinking about some future Messiah. He was actually thinking about what God had already done, not what God was going to do. And so this just kind of highlights what kind of the nuance and the kind of complexity of what the gospel writers thought fulfilling a prophecy meant. And it wasn't a matter of, here's this guy in the Old Testament who says, this is what's going to happen, and then poof, it happened. No, it's much more complicated than that, and also more beautiful because to me, I thought this was just so interesting, is that Hosea does actually talk about saying this is what will happen, and he refers to this new King David. And out of all the gospel writers, Matthew loves to talk about the new David. He likes that Davidic line type stuff. And yet he doesn't even refer to this verse in Hosea where Hosea is anticipating this new David. Instead, he looks at this, out of Egypt I called my son. And as you wrestle with that and as you think about that, you start to realize that there's a good reason why Matthew is doing this, because Matthew is saying something much bigger than simply Jesus is the Messiah, Jesus is the new David. He's saying more than that. He's saying that in the same way that Hosea is looking back at a God who had acted in the world to save his people in Israel by calling them out of Egypt, even though in the context of when Hosea says this, the Israelites are absolutely failing. They're unfaithful. They're being adulterous. They're worshiping other gods. They're in love with power and political might and all of that. But even then, he's saying, "Look, God loved you and called you out of Egypt." And so what Matthew is doing is he's taking that and saying, "This, I called my son out of Egypt." This person is basically the new Israel that was called out of Egypt before, but this new Israel is going to remain faithful. God calls Israel like a son. This actually is the son, and so Matthew is riffing on that verse in a way by showing that in the same way that God saved his people out of Egypt before in this old Exodus, now there is this new Exodus with the actual Son of God. And so there's just a lot that's being said there that he's able to do by referring to this verse instead of the other. And what that's called is it's called midrash. That's the type of interpretive kind of fulfillment that is being discussed there. But what I really focused on in my sermon was in the same way Greg, he talked about what these texts say, but then he also focused on how they're said. And I love that. I thought that was great. So I decided to do the same thing. Look at how this is said. And when you look at Hosea 11:1, there's just this tender language that's used there that God, calls Israel, this people group. He doesn't call them an empire or a commerce capital or anything like that. He calls him my son, my child. And it's just that tender language. And he says, I loved him and I called him out. I didn't coerce him. I didn't force him. I didn't strong arm him. I called to him. And just that tender language just really reflects God's delight in his people, and so that's kind of what I focused on, is the nature of this delight that God has in us. And you see that especially in the children language, where we're referred to as God's children, and Jesus too refers to the disciples and his followers as God's children, and that we are all brothers and sisters. And it's just so beautiful. And you see this delight all over the place. And I shared Zephaniah 3:17, where it kind of indicates that God longs to sing over us and to serenade us with music and to clap his hands over us, and just that level of delight. And the fact that God wants to spend all of eternity dwelling with us, it doesn't make sense that he would do that with a people that he did not delight in. But that's the promise, is that he delights in us, and he delights in us so much that he wants to spend eternity with us. And then I just also riffed off of Greg's 3 takeaways that he had in his sermon, which is really nice, that he kind of did half of my work for me. He kind of set the structure, and then I just had to plug in my own kind of verse. And so he looked at the beauty of God. I looked at the beauty of God who delights and the good news of that. And I just talked about how, the whole Christmas story of the baby in the manger, that's basically, God wouldn't do that if he didn't delight in humanity. And so the baby in the manger is God's delight become flesh. And I just think that that's so important. And I think that when you really believe that God delights in his people at that level, that can be very healing if we meditate on that. For some people, I think that could be very, very healing. And then the second takeaway is to make God's delight your own. And we don't really hear much about God's delight in us. And so I kind of looked at some of the reasons why. I looked at some theological obstacles that some people have to believing that God delights in us. But the fact is that God does delight in us, and we have to take that seriously, and we have to include that in our assessment of ourselves and the world. And people a lot of times will have a hard time accepting that delight because they feel guilt or shame or whatever. And when you look at the text of the worst sin in the history of God's creation, Adam and Eve, at least the worst sin in terms of the implications, he responded with this delight and tenderness even after that. And so we absolutely are called to accept the fact that God delights in us. And then I talked about some discipleship implications of that. And then I shared my third takeaway, which is that we should then delight in others. And I just said that, look, if we're called to love like the Lord loves, that means that we have to delight in others as the Lord delights in them. And that is a skill. And that's something that we have to learn how to do, especially in a world where we're taught the opposite of what God calls us to. We're called to love one another, build one another up, to encourage one another. But instead, we are trained every day. We're just trained to judge one another and to tear down one another and to be suspicious of one another. And but what we need to do is we have to learn how to delight in others. And I shared a couple examples from working in mental health about the power of giving that kind of delightful attention to people, and how that can calm us and make us secure in ways that we need that. And then I said, well, how do we get better at that? And I proposed that it helps to think of one another as unfinished children, because in the same way that when we see toddlers do crayon drawings and they're terrible, but we love them because we delight in the kid, in the same way, when you realize that people are unfinished children, well, they're bad and dumb and stupid behavior, the better we can get at seeing all of that bad stuff as just crayon drawings, the easier it is to delight in them. And that also opens up opportunities for more tender assessments of them. And then the last thing I said is that it's helpful to just look at everyone not in and of themselves, but in the context of our story, in the context of our testimony. And when you do that, it helps soften some of the hard edges of other people. And it might even open up space to delight in their charm and to see them in a softer kind of assessment. And the example I used is from, inspired by the MuseCast a couple weeks ago, where we were talking about the Christmas Vacation movie. And I loved Cousin Eddie in that movie, but I would hate to live with him. But in the story, he's great. And I think that's true in life too. When you think of your life as your testimony, as your story, as your sitcom even, you can look at people that might be hard to delight in, but as part of a story, they make the story better, and you can kind of have that arm's length distance, and you might open space where they might become strangely charming. And that is my summary. Oh, you're muted. Rookie.
It's only been like 5 years of doing this. Oh my gosh. Very nice, Dan. Clap, clap. Yeah. I gave you an in-person MuseCast high five.
That's right.
For your sermon. So yeah, thank you so much for sharing. Again, I am always so impressed and blessed by how we can present aspects of the story of Emmanuel, of this beautiful Messiah that came in the most surprising of ways. I'm just so impressed by that, and how every year it just seems like there are those sermons that are a part of the series that are just so timely, and I felt that way about yours, and I loved your approach with Hosea and sharing that, and then the take that you took about just fleshing out God's delight in us, and not just in humanity, but like in us individually. Yeah. And I just thought that was so beautiful. And you shared Zephaniah, right? I'm not making that up. Yeah. That might be a nugget. Just saying. It is so beautiful and just so good, and I think so timely. And you're right. I think what better way to combat all the things in the world that are really working overtime, and sometimes not having to work very hard, because it seems to be so easy just to get us pitted against one another. And so not only were you encouraging us to recognize and realize that God delights over us as his children, he's tender toward us. That language in Hosea is tender. Mm-hmm. Not only that, but then we too should be delighting in others. And I tell you what, it may seem, like you like to do, and it may seem oversimplified, but what better way to combat just the ickiness in the world than to say, no, we're going to see the dignity in people and then delight in them, make space for that. And that does require some proximity. So yeah, it was a beautiful reminder, your sermon was. I thought it was a beautiful challenge. And my hope and my prayer is that people really like soak it in. And so I'm thankful that we have this show to kind of further explore this and to hear the things that you didn't get to say. Because I just think it's just so very timely.
Yeah.
So timely.
Well, thank you. Yeah. Thanks for that. And, speaking of timely, we didn't even mention Greg's comment before the sermon about some of the stuff that's going on in Minnesota here with our Somali community. And so that's definitely good timing also, because I tell you what, I've worked, I have several Somali coworkers when I worked at the hospital, and they were great. I loved them so much. And I had a duplex in South Minneapolis for a while, and I rented out one side to a Somali family. And that was so fun because they were fresh here. I mean, they had just come over here, and the mom, she had lived in a hut with like dirt floors. And so in this duplex, she had hardwood floors, it was really nice like that. And like she saw the dishwasher, and I showed her how to use it, and she was like emotional about it. But what's funny is like within like a couple months, she went from like overwhelmed by just how amazing, this is, to complaining about a spot on the floor that was too cold. So she had me come over and she was trying to explain that the floor here in the bathroom is cold. Is there any way to make the floor warmer? And it's funny how our standard of living goes from this must be heaven to, this could be better.
Yeah. I don't know. Could do a little better.
Yeah, but it was great.
Yeah.
I loved them. So
yeah, and we felt like that was important to take the time to do, and to do sincerely and well. And I am so thankful, that we had that space, because it is so true. It was an awful thing said. Damn it, I can't imagine hearing that said so publicly. Yeah, my heart breaks. And so I am so thankful, because the diversity in our state, and our church is what makes us rich. And I fully believe that. So, yeah.
Yeah.
God delights.
That's right. Well, and yeah, I mean, you can't think of people as garbage if you've developed a skill to delight in others.
Yeah.
And so just the comment itself exposes the lack of skill that person has. And so with that, should I talk about
that? Yeah. So let's put some more delight into the world. Tell us some more.
Well, I cut one big thing out that I will talk about, because I got so excited about this delight thing, and just because there's I talked about children in the text and how that language is used to kind of point to God's delight in us, but there's other language that's used to capture that delight as well. A big one is the language of romance, and so for instance, this is Isaiah 62 3-5. Isaiah says, "You will be a crown of splendor in the hand of the Lord, a royal diadem in the hand of your God. No longer will they call you deserted or name your land desolate, but you will be called Hephzibah and your land Beulah." Now, Hephzibah was the wife of Hezekiah, and that word literally means "in her I delight." And so that's what God's people will be called. And your land Beulah, which means possessed in marriage. So your land will be God's land, and that's how intimate our relationship will be with God. For the Lord will take delight in you, and your land will be married. As a young man marries a young woman, so will your builder marry you. As a bridegroom rejoices over his bride, so will your God rejoice over you. And then Jesus totally takes that whole thing up and he applies it to himself. When John the Baptist and his disciples are trying to figure out if Jesus really is the one who is promised, this is what they say. They came to Jesus and they start questioning him and saying, how is it that we, John the Baptist and the disciples, we and the Pharisees, we fast all the time, but your disciples do not fast? And Jesus replied like this: how can the guests of the bridegroom mourn while he is with them? The time will come when the bridegroom will be taken away from them, and then they will fast. And so here Jesus is saying the reason why we're not fasting is because this concept, this idea that Isaiah is getting at, it's become true in me. I am that bridegroom. And then finally, John at the end, he sees in Revelation 21:2, he sees this holy city. This is 21:2, the holy city, the new Jerusalem, coming down and prepared as a bride, beautifully dressed for her husband. And again, that delightful language is all built into that. And you know how it is when you are romantically in love with somebody, just the delight that you have in that person, and you can be with them no matter what, and that's all you can think about, and that is what is being used there to talk about God's heart toward his people and toward each of us individually. And I just think that is awesome and beautiful, but I had to cut that out because I was out of time, so I just stuck with the children theme. So
yeah. What I love about that part, Dan, I'm sad that we couldn't hear it, but I'm so thankful that people got to hear it now. It just again reiterates this relationality, which is unlike literally any other
Yeah.
God. Right. And so when we celebrate this monumentous, life-changing event of Jesus coming to earth, it represents so much and it
Mm.
surprised so many. We've said that over and over again. But yes, it does represent freedom and salvation, and deliverance and all the things. But it also represents like intimacy and this beautiful relationship
Mhm.
that is very tender and loving. And I just think that's something that we can't get or should not get too used to. Like that shouldn't become rote. Like we should be marveling at that. We should be awed by that,
Yeah.
because the creator of the universe is awed by you, by
Mm.
me, by like what?
Yeah.
Wild, wild, wild. And I just, yes, thank you for bringing that up because
Hmm.
again, I just think it's so beautiful. And so many people, Dan, feel unworthy and they feel less than, or they recognize how screwed up they are, or how much they've messed up, or they've been told whatever they've been told. And this is just Jesus saying, that's not the truth.
Hmm.
You are so worthy that I delight in you. I desire to draw near to you. I want to be in relationship with you. And I just think that is very powerful.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. And I think that's right too. You have to really work on that, the obstacles to that, the reality of that delight that are in your heart. And we all do. I mean, we all have to,
Yeah.
like, even as I'm writing this and, putting this sermon together, it's like, this is what is promised. This is what is said. And like, it like warms my heart and it like excites me, but there are obstacles to that even within me. And I think that that's part of discipleship, is working through that and finding out, learning more and more, the
Hmm.
reality, and living more and more into that. So yeah.
Yeah. And I think, oh gosh, I hope I'm not misremembering because we're in so many different meetings and having these
Yeah.
conversations. So,
Yeah.
but were you not saying as a part of this sermon, or maybe anyway, just about how there are some religious traditions that
Mhm.
really do kind of bank on the
Yeah.
don't, okay, yeah, okay. So
Yeah.
I'm on the
That
right
was
track
this one.
there. Okay,
Yeah.
good. Thank God.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Don't
Yeah.
want to be giving anything away, but I'm like, no, I think it was for this.
Yeah.
So anyway, I just if you could talk a little bit more about that. Again, this isn't to bash
Hmm.
other traditions, but it's just to
No.
say like it makes sense that some people really do feel like I'm just a wretched sinner,
Right. Right.
and who am I that the son
Yeah.
would die for me kind of thing.
Yeah. And I understand that feeling
Yeah.
because I am a sinner and I have screwed up, and, you know,
1000% right here. Yeah.
right. But that's why you have to let the text challenge you on everything, including all of those small views of yourself. And so, what happens is, and it's, we all have to do it. We have to, there's all these claims that are made in the text about God and about us and about our future, and about how we're saved and what sin is. And as a believer and as a thinking believer and as a theologian, you have to try to figure out, how do these all fit together? And what happens is you put this one here and you fit that one here, and then whoop, this one squirts out over there. And it's like, oh, I got to bring that back in. But now that means this one's going to squirt over there. And you just have to kind of figure out how they all can stay together. And that's what theology is trying to make the pieces fit. And what one kind of tradition has done is they've looked at this truth that we are saved by grace and not by works, and which is true. And they've emphasized that, and they realize that God's grace is the center of the entire salvation kind of system, I guess you could call it that. And they're absolutely right about that. There's nothing we can do to earn our salvation. The problem comes is when they take it one step further and they try to kind of put a hedge around that grace. They try to cushion it and to puff it out into places that the text doesn't really tell us to do that. And so what they'll say is that, not only are we saved by grace, but we can't do anything good without God's grace. And that's a big logic leap. But they think it's related because if I could do good things on my own, then I wouldn't need God to save me, is the logic that's used. Now, the logic ultimately fails, and I don't have time to go into all of that now, but other than to say, I mean, you look at how the word that's used for grace, and it kind of speaks against it just in what the word is based on. And the word is based on this Old Testament word kehen, which is grace, but it's grace that's prompted by delight. You show favor to something that you delight in, and so even at the heart of the word grace, you have that delight in humanity there. So and so I just think that we need to let the text correct all of our beliefs, and some are harder because it feels like when I talk small about myself, it feels humble, but it's not. It's just derogatory, and it sort of mocks God's delight, and that's why I think we have to be really careful with that, and get better at living into the truth that God delights in us.
Yeah. Oh, that was good, Dan. Worth the price of admission there. And something that I'll be thinking about, like, don't be guilty of mocking God's delight, because that's really what I hadn't thought of it that way. That's really what's going down when you are just belittling yourself and not living into the truth of who God says you are. Now, gotta say it because someone will be like, "Oh, do you mean it doesn't?" No, like sin. Yes, we need the things that we do that help, that cause us to miss the mark and not be moving toward Jesus. Yes, we need to be held accountable. We need to, repent.
Yeah.
We need change. Yeah, all of that is true.
Right. Yeah.
But the thrust of even the reason for the grace to do those things is because God does love and delight in us, not because he thinks we're just wicked, wretched, and can't stand us and needs to smack us around into shape.
Right.
Like, ugh.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. And God delights in us as we are, but he doesn't delight in our sin at all. In fact, the language of the text is that he detests it. And that kind of loathing that God has is for our sin, largely because it threatens those parts of us that are so delightful. And so it's not a get out of jail free kind of delight. It's an accommodating delight, and it's also a future oriented delight. It's a calling delight. It's, you are still in Egypt. And Egypt is still in you, and you need to get Egypt out of you. But I delight in you, and together we're going to make sure that happens. And so I think that it's just so important to, and it's really hard to face the challenges of spiritual growth if you don't have the security of God's love, and if you don't have the security of God's delight. In my mind, it's hard to do that because, well, I'll save this for my nugget, but it's you can't do it.
Perfect.
Yeah.
All right. Well, really quick, before we do get to your nugget, what kind of feedback did you get? I mean, I kind of already know, but
yeah.
I like
Well, I tell you, I love it when people come and share with their thoughts and how the word has kind of impacted them, and where it's affirmed things in their life, and where it's helped them see something from a different perspective, and I had a lot of that, and mostly just this permission to delight in people, even when you don't agree with them, even when they bother you, to just try to find delight in them anyway is a good thing. But then also the fact that you have to be safe and you have to have good boundaries, and this idea of a story is helpful, but it's not the gospel. It's just a trick. It's a tactic to help. And so it's not like this call to get into dangerous situations. I mean, Jaws is a really good story, but I don't want people swimming with sharks, and so just a lot of stuff like that. And I'll say this too. Somebody had said that, what do you do when that delight is not reciprocated? And that is really hard when you're showing delight, despite the fact that they bother you and there's all sorts of, cousin Eddie-ness about them. And yet you're still doing the work of delighting in them and nothing comes of it. And that's hard. And, but what I would say is that you might not get reciprocated with the delight that you show. In fact, I would guess that most of the time that delight is not reciprocated. But it's important to find people who do delight in you. And because one person is just not going to feed you in the way that you need. That's why it takes a body. That's why, faith takes a whole community. That's the first thing. And then the second thing I said is that you have to, if we're made in God's image and God is love and we're called to love like God, then that means that we are made to love in others and to delight in others, which means that we should be spiritually nourished by loving others and delighting in others, even if it's not reciprocated. And so it's easy to get fed off of the incoming delight and the incoming love. But if you can get good at tapping into the nourishment of delighting in others and feel the godliness of delighting in others and just the comfort of doing something godly, if you can find the nourishment in that, well, you become unstoppable, because now, whether it's reciprocated or not, you are still getting spiritual nourishment. But of course, find people who do delight in you, because that is the truth. You are delightful. There's something in you that is delightful that God wants to call out. And so that's what I would say about my feedback. And there's a couple other things I missed. Oh, one more thing.
Yeah, go for it.
I did have one guy, Robert, come up to me, but he didn't say his name was Robert. He said, "Hey, I'm Eddie."
Oh,
like,
yes.
Cousin Eddie. And I'm like, oh, that was so funny. So anyway.
Perfect.
Yeah,
Perfect. He was going to test you.
Yeah. I fell for it
me
too.
or not.
So,
That's hilarious. Oh, nice job, Robert, Eddie, whomever you are. I love it. Oh, well, thank you again, Dan, for the time you put into it and the heart with which you delivered. I know that it mattered to you, and I think it was timely and good. So thank you.
Good.
Are you ready, sir?
I'm ready. Let's do it.
I mean,
wait.
Oh,
Hold
I was
on.
going to say, you're not properly. There we go. I need you festive. This is a festive nugget time. Very good. I've already sort of let the cat out of the bag. My nugget is a verse, but I just love it so much. So that's
good.
my nugget. So
let's end with yours.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
I think that'll be a better end.
Okay.
So I will share my nugget, and my nugget I kind of hinted at, but yeah, delighting in others. It's hard to do. I mean, I think it's a skill, but I would say it's 10 times harder to do if you don't delight in who you are, in your own self. Now, I'm not saying like self-love or anything like that, but I'm just saying, I'm saying like being grateful for existing, just like delighting in the fact that, if you have working limbs, delight in that. If you can see, delight in the fact that you can see. And if you can hear, delight in the fact that you can listen to music, and just that absolute like glee of just being and delighting in that. And then, delighting in your testimony and, where God is, what God is doing in your life. And it's really hard to delight in others, which you never know when you're going to encounter them. It's all circumstantial. It's all, depending on what happens, and you don't know anything about them. And if you can't find delight in the person you're with 24/7, it's going to be really hard to find the delight in somebody that you only see in short bursts. And so I think that delight in yourself, it's not self-love, it is that just deep gratitude and just the joy and the giddiness of being and the profound opportunity that God has given us to become whatever we can become while we're here, within the context and the constraints of where we're born and all of that. But it doesn't matter where we are or what situation we're in. We can always rest in the fact that who we are, no matter where we are, we have something delightful about us. And the only way that we can really show delight in others is getting better at delighting in what God has given to us. That is my nugget.
Beautiful. My nugget. I will start with just a sentence encouragement and then I'll read the verse, the scripture. But my encouragement is to truly allow Jesus to be the fulfillment in your life. I love when you, Dan, spoke about getting our, I'm saying it differently, but like having our security, having our foundation in the fact that we are loved and delighted in by God Almighty. And so get that, make sure that you are seeking that fulfillment from Jesus, because that's really what is going to withstand all of the ups and downs and the ins and outs and the fickleness of what it means to be a human in this world. And allow that to fill you so much that you are secure and then that you overflow. And the reason why I firmly believe that each of us can stand firm on that foundation is partially because of the passages that were shared today and in Dan's sermon and will be shared, throughout the series. But Zephaniah 3, the Lord your God is with you, the mighty warrior who saves. He will take great delight in you. In his love, he will no longer rebuke you, but will rejoice over you with singing. And just picture that kind of adoration and love from a God who draws near. And I think that is what we can be standing on. And then that will help inform all of the situations that we find ourselves in and all the relationships that we have that maybe even we struggle with. And many times that's a relationship that we have with ourselves. And so know that God delights in you, that you are delightful, and then please share that delight with others. That is my nugget.
That's awesome. That's the
right.
heart of it right there.
That's it. Well, Dan, if people wanted to share some delightful things with us, where would they do that?
I would guess you would want to go right here.
Oh, that makes sense. MuseCast at
Yeah,
whchurch.org. Beautiful, beautiful. Well, hey, we'll be right back next Tuesday, so join us. We'll have more to talk about. Thank you for being here. We do pray and hope that you believe that you are absolutely worthy of being delighted in. We are delighted by you guys. We love this community and we just thank you loads for being a part of this wacky thing that we do every week. Have a blessed week, everyone.
Sounds good.
Take care.